We have some big news to discuss today as multiple reports have now linked Jacob Markstrom of the Calgary Flames to the Toronto Maple Leafs via trade. So we're going to break down those reports and discuss what potential options the Leafs have and what they could give up to acquire the Flames star. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. Before we do, I want to say this episode is sponsored by Rentals.ca. Now, Darius, it is no secret that Leafs fans want moves, and with the Leafs having clear holes in their lineup, injuries continuing to pile up, fans have been calling for a while now for Brad Treliving to make some shakeups to the team. And if you feel like you need some changes in your life and to shake up your life a little, then it's time to move, and Rentals.ca has you covered.
You can rent houses, apartments, condos, whatever it is. Rentals.ca has you covered. From coast to coast, you can go straight to Rentals.ca's website that's clean and easy to use. You can pinpoint exactly on the map where you want to move, and Rentals.ca will find you the best rental listings.
Yeah, my family has personally used this. They're a great company. If you want to check out the link in the pinned comment and the description, it would mean the world to us. And they are big Leafs fans, so make sure to check them out. And thank you to Rentals.ca for sponsoring this one and this video. All right, Darius, let's get right into it today.
Yes.
Some weird and wild reports are starting to surface, and we got to discuss it, and it's Jacob Markstorm. So this is the first one saying the rumor is the Leafs are one of the teams that are seen as a potential fit for Flames goalie Jacob Markstrom. Would you want Markstrom, or are we happy with the Jones-Wall tandem? Darius, and there was another one saying report the Leafs have been linked to Jacob Markstrom. We're starting to float around. This has been floated around before as well. He's a very solid goalie. He is a little bit pricey. Before we get into some potential mock trades, what some of these articles have to say, what are your just initial thoughts on this? The initial thoughts on kind of how this is feeling, especially with the current goalie situation in Toronto?
Yeah, I think the Leafs have been linked with the Calgary Flames like all year for defensemen and whatnot. But I think getting a goaltender in return wouldn't be a bad thing. It wouldn't be a bad thing, especially Jacob Markstrom. I mean, he's had a decent year. He has a 912 save percentage so far this year. The Flames have been figuring it out recently. Obviously, the season as a whole hasn't been good for them, but he has been a bit of a bright spot. He is getting a little bit older, but he is a career 910, so he is above league average this year for sure. So I don't think it would be a horrible trade as long as you're not giving up too much if you're the Leafs. Maybe if you can dump some salary, in the trade as well, that'd be good. But yeah, if you're looking at it, straight up, Jacob Markstrom coming to the Leafs, it's not a bad thing. It might solve some issues for you. I don't know if it's going to solve any issues that you can't already solve with the personnel you have right now, but still, he's a little bit more proven than Joseph Woll, let's say. Although I am a huge fan of Joseph Woll, but when you head into the playoffs, he had a great playoffs last year, but can he replicate that? We don't know for sure, right? There is no real track record there, so it's interesting. It is very interesting. I don't know if I hate it or if I love it. It's just certainly interesting. So I would like to see how that plays out.
Yeah, this would kind of be a move that Brad Treliving does to try and bolster the team going forward. And the article basically says that the Flames would have to retain a significant portion of Markstrom's cap hit, perhaps as much as half to swing a deal. Convincing them to do so could cost an interested club like the Leafs a first-round pick, a top prospect, or a good young NHL player in the deal. And again, if Markstrom is willing to accept a trade to a contender, the earliest that could happen is the offseason when teams have more cap space if they want to go it that way. So, Darius, it's very interesting. Looking at his stats, you kind of mentioned it. He's having a pretty good year. He had a pretty bad year in 2022 with only an 89 save percentage. But this season, he's really putting together a solid year. He is 33 years old, and I mean, when you're looking at the Leafs core and how they're trying to win now, so the age I don't think would, stray me too much away because you're trying to win right now. He would be the best goalie on the Maple Leafs, maybe aside from Wall, but Wall obviously you don't necessarily have the guarantee. We know that Markstrom can perform, and hopefully he can perform good in the playoffs if the Leafs trade for him. And Wall would be more of that's a lot to ask of a young star goalie in that. And I don't know, do you think he would put the Leafs over the top? Let's say they add Markstrom and one defenseman. Do you think that would be enough, or do you think at this point it's still, like we discussed in other videos, it would have to rely on Nylander and all these guys stepping up, or do you think it would have to all work together and this is just a Brad Treliving swing for the fences move to try to change something?
I'm not sure any goaltender who isn't Connor Hellebuck coming to the Leafs or Shesterkin or something, which would never happen, would make that much of a difference, honestly, with who they have right now. Although the experience factor is a thing, like Jacob Markstrom coming in, you kind of know what you're going to get. With Joseph Woll, he did have one good playoffs, but we've seen it, year after year. Goalies have one good playoff, or any player has one good playoff, and then, where do they go, right? We just don't know for sure. So in terms of that, you are getting the experience and all that stuff. But it is an interesting trade. Like, it's certainly not going to be one for one. I feel like there would be a defenseman or two involved, which can make things interesting. Obviously, it depends who the Leafs are giving up as well, because I do think they have a couple trade pieces, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I think you just get the experience factor. I think he can certainly help, but I don't know if this is a goalie that's going to put them over the top. Like, I don't know if he's like a top tier goaltender.
Yeah, and I don't really know either. And we'll discuss now. Let's get into some trades. Obviously, it is the Flames. We used to discuss Nikita Zadorov before he got shipped away to Vancouver. Now let's discuss, I guess, potentially a Nick Robertson. It makes all the sense in the world to trade Nick Robertson and maybe getting Chris Tanev back alongside Markstrom in a deal centered around Nick Robertson and a pick and Abruzzese, whoever you want to go for. Darius, I'm going to throw it to you now for a second. Do you think it would be what kind of trade do you foresee happening if they want to get, whether it's just Jacob Markstrom, Chris Tanev and Markstrom? I'll leave that up to you, but I think either way, Nick Robertson is on the way out at some point this season.
Yeah, I think Sheldon Keefe, just the way he's been deploying him, it kind of speaks to. I'm not sure if it's that he doesn't like him or he just doesn't think he fits into this lineup. I think Sheldon Keefe is kind of telling Brad Living right now, like, we need some help in different areas, whether that's like Elias Lindholm, who would look great on the Leafs third line, center position there, and moving Domi over to the wing or something. There's a lot of different options. I think if you want to make a big splash, like if you are gonna go get Jacob Markstrom, make a huge trade. Get Markstrom, get Tanev, get Hanifin if you can. Retain salary, all that stuff. He's a UFA at the end of the year. Try and make a big splash. Do something that can really upgrade your team. Don't just pick at the scraps, right? Around the edges. Do something that'll really help, especially if you're gonna give up a guy like Robertson. I personally really like Nick Robertson. I would hate it if he was not a Maple Leaf anymore because I think that he does have a future in the NHL as a goal scorer. I do see potential there. I mean, he has 12 points this year in 26 games. That's pretty good considering he's on the third line. I do like the third line. I just don't know if the Leafs roster construction allows them to keep the lines the way they are, especially if they want to succeed in the playoffs. But if they include him, I mean, Nick Abruzzese and the Marlies has been thrown around. That name's been thrown around a lot. I'm sure you'd like to, get rid of Samsonov and that cap hit. I know he's a UFA at the end of the year, and he did have a good last game too. Let me make that clear. I thought he played well, but I'm just not sure if you want to continue with him, especially if you're bringing another goaltender in. So a lot of moving pieces, a lot of trade scenarios that I wouldn't necessarily be happy with, especially with Robertson going out the door. But I think if it makes sense and you're going to upgrade your team in other areas that you need to upgrade, then you have to do things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned he's having a very solid. I mean, Sheldon Keefe doesn't like him clearly, and Samsonov. I mean, yeah, the big reason we're talking about trades in the first place is because of Samsonov's season. He did have a very good game in a decent game, a solid game in the Leafs loss a couple nights ago, but his save percentage is still down. I wouldn't be surprised if Brad Living at some point needs to, because you're also relying on, obviously Martin Jones is 33, starting to show a little bit of signs of slowing down, and you're relying on Joseph Wall to come back from injury and hope that he was who he was before, and I'm sure he will at some point, but I don't know if he's going to be able to get back to that in this season, and they don't, or maybe even immediately right now. They need to win as many games is kind of my point here, because they're losing a lot. They're falling out of the race slowly. Obviously, they're still right in there, but if you keep losing games and you keep deploying goaltenders who are not very or not playing very well, then it's going to get rough very quickly. So any quick final thoughts on a fun topic? And again, Markstrom is still under contract for a couple years, so it could be an interesting thing.
And it's interesting that you bring up that the Leafs need to win. Well, clearly they need to win. Anyone needs to win in the NHL, right? But they need to start stringing some wins together. And the rest of the way, from this point to the end of the season, the Leafs have the worst schedule in terms of opponents, in terms of like toughness down the stretch till the end of the season. Number one in the NHL, the Bruins are right behind them at number two. So it's not going to be tough. Real Leaf fans know that they play up to their opponents anyway. Usually they lose against lesser opponents, less skilled opponents, which makes no sense. So this might work in their favor. Who knows? But it's going to be a tough schedule the rest of the season. So they're going to have to find a way to upgrade, probably get creative because as we've seen this weekend, this was a tough weekend for the Leafs, and it's going to be another tough week for the Leafs. This is a hard week in terms of games. Like they're playing the Oilers. We went through it yesterday. The schedule does not lend well to them this week. So it's going to be interesting to see if Brad Living pulls the trigger sooner rather than later, because it might happen. It could be the end of this week.
Yeah, and hopefully it does. And let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this trade and if you think it's likely at all. But that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you Rentals.ca again for sponsoring this one. We'll see you tomorrow.